With that, I think it's time to go ahead and introduce our speaker. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren, who will introduce Greg.
Thanks, Greg. Well, we're privileged tonight to have a fellow ham and meteorologist and employee of the National Weather Service. And I'd like to say I timed it so that he could give his presentation when we were having an actual weather event going on, but that was a bit serendipitous. But we were interested to have this done this month because if you go to the weather.gov site, you will find that there are a couple of classes, the basic spotter classes that are available for this season taking place. One on 4/29 and one on the 3rd of May. These are basic introductory. So if Greg does a good job, he may have a few more attendees tonight. So I'll turn it over to you, Greg. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Lauren. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. So yes, good evening. Thank you again for having me tonight to kind of give you a rundown of what the basic Skywarn spotter class actually would look like. So this is actually the class that we're providing this year. We've had a couple so far, and there's, like you just mentioned before, there's already 2 classes left this year, one end of the month and one in early May. So without further ado, let's kind of go ahead and we'll dive in. So one of the big things is, why do we need Skywarn spotters to begin with? The program started way back in, I guess it was the early 70s. And the hams actually were a tremendous part of the upbringing of the current look and feel of what the Skywarn program is. Now, obviously now with the advent of technology, social media, cell phones, it's changed quite a bit, but nonetheless, the same premise still exists, that we need folks who are volunteering their time and services. We'll kind of direct them and maybe to where to go, but we're never advocating for someone to put themselves in harm's way. But, if it's kind of like that whole saying with the TSA, if you see something, say something. In terms of this, when it comes to severe thunderstorms, large hail, damaging winds, flash flooding, tornadoes, wildfires, the whole gambit of things. It really helps us get a better sense of actually what is happening with a particular storm, whether the storm is severe or tornado warned or whether it's not, because your reports relying on to us can actually help dictate if a warning is needed for that storm, or if we need to continue this warning farther downstream to help alert other folks, maybe possibly in harms and high impact situations. Our radar in particular out in rural Pueblo County is a fantastic piece of equipment, but it's just that. It's just a tool in our tool bag. So we do need literally the eyes and ears from our spotters to help relay back reports to our office in terms of what they're seeing, again, falling out of a particular storm. And, Colorado in general is home to many tornadoes, many landspouts, kind of like tornadoes, but not really the true definition of what a tornado really is in terms of how we see it on radar. And they typically are relatively weak and short-lived. So a lot of times when a radar is spinning around, at its 360-degree radial, it can miss situations. Again, very, very quick spin-up with a particular storm. Before we dive into the full presentation, just a few quick housekeeping items. Usually on this slide we have in there, but we're not giving out Skywarn IDs any longer, and that's for the general public. So for our hams, you still are a very special partnership we have with you all, that we are still providing Skywarn IDs, EL, blah, 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 whatever it might be. Some of you mentioned it earlier today, your call signs, your ham, or your spotter IDs. So we're using that for our database, but also that's what's used for the Pikes Peak net, the daily weather net that's run. You're checking for that as well too. So if you don't have an ID and you want one, send me an email afterwards. I'll be happy to get you one of those. There's a few pieces of information I need from you as far as location-wise, pretty much. This year, also have a little bit of a different format. For those of you who have taken classes in the past, we kind of just lecture, and it's not really what I want to do. We had a pretty high impact situation last year. I think it was around early August. And we got a couple of reports of false tornadoes or false funnel clouds. And I was actually on the radar desk that day issuing the warnings for the storms. Things just didn't look right to me, but I have 5 or 6 people tell me there's a tornado on the ground, out in basically from Falcon and eastward kind of deal. So kind of out towards the more across the plains. Those weren't great reports because that didn't actually happen, didn't exist. There's no other evidence of it, and they couldn't get a picture or a video of it to prove that it had occurred. Again, what radar was showing me was not accurate in my mind to what they were telling me. So towards the end of the presentation today, we're actually going to run through a few simulations to kind of help guide a better narrative that when you do see something, basically a better script for you to create to be able to report back to our office again going forward. So kind of talk a little bit about what we do, weather service-wise, some of the weather and safety hazards across southern Colorado, again, how to report back to us, and then we'll get into the simulation. So I basically think about the next 45 to 60 minutes should cover everything you need to know about the Skywarn basic class. So for those of you who have no idea what we do, our office in Pueblo, Colorado is one of 122 offices across the country, all outlined here, as you can see on the map. Also, there are 13 river forecast centers that forecast basically floods or just precipitation across those basins across the country. And obviously, we have 2 that cover our area here because we have 2 rivers. We have the Rio Grande out in San Luis Valley, and we also have the Arkansas River that comes through most of the Front Range. So the forecast office in Tulsa, Oklahoma is the one who covers the Arkansas River, and then the forecast office or River Forecast Center in Fort Worth, Texas covers the Rio Grande Basin for us. So this is kind of how we're staffed. We run a couple different shifts. We run 3 different shifts a day. First one begins, say day shift wise, goes to 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then 4 p.m. to midnight to 8 a.m. And we're constantly rotating through. At least 2 forecasters on each particular shift or desk. Here again is a listing of the personnel. The meteorologist in charge is the boss, helps to run scheduling and budget, just kind of the overall function of the office, making sure we're kind of all staying on task. My position with the ward and coordination meteorologist is I'm also a manager too, not so much in the way of supervisory conditions as the MIC does, again, meteorologist in charge. But my main job is to do public outreach, education, mitigation plan with counties, and basically being a liaison between our office, emergency management, decision makers, and the local TV folks as well too. So very, very fun, exciting. I absolutely love what I do. I'm really hoping that once things begin to open back up, I actually be on the road a lot more than I have been. I've been at home for the past 13 months basically doing this. So it's still great, but nothing beats the good old handshake, as I truly desire that. So again, we have 3 different shifts. We issue all of the severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings, flash flood warnings, blizzards, winter storm, flash floods, the whole gambit. It's what we do. So we have 21 counties across southern Colorado that we are responsible for when it comes to issuing those watches and warnings, as well as just the daily forecast in general too. The picture here on the right-hand side shows you where each one of those Doppler weather radars that we control, we maintain, exists. And again, the one out here in basically rural Pueblo County, basically southern Colorado, is what covers really much of the Colorado Divide and then eastward. So basically, once we get too far west into the San Luis Valley and then over into the San Juans and Uncompahgre, those areas out there, we tend to lose a lot of visibility unless they're really, really tall storms. But the cool thing with the Doppler radar is that much like our office, it's running 24/7, 365. It's constantly scanning in more of a passive situation. What it's doing is it's scanning constantly and it's showing us pictures like this as far as base reflectivity. If you look at the radar tonight, looking at it right here actually as we speak, watching the snowfall kind of move off the high terrain, the ramparts, and then again across the I-25 corridor out into the plains. Well, the base reflectivity is showing you the intensity of a particular storm or area of shower. So the colors, as far as the pinks, the reds, the pinks maybe represent a little bit more hail, reds, really high intensity rain and or snow or melting, depending on how the atmosphere column, as you go up in the atmosphere, if it's all below freezing, if it's warmer in certain areas, a little bit of melting, that kind of stuff. It all plays into what the radar is showing us. And again, the lighter colors, the blues, I should say at least, more of the lighter situations like snow, light rain, and so on and so forth. Base reflectivity, it's based on the Doppler principle, the Doppler effect. So when you have the cool colors, they are moving towards the radar, basically hygrometers or scatterers. Well, it could be hailstones, could be dust, bugs, debris. Unfortunately, sometimes due to tornadoes, or just rain droplets themselves, or snowflakes. So basically, again, the cooler colors are moving towards the radar, and then the warmer colors moving away from the radar. So basically, when you kind of get that directional change, basically outbound versus inbound, you kind of see a little bit of a tight rotation involved within a storm, and that could lead us to possibly issuing a tornado warning, or just constantly watching a storm as it spins. And some of those bigger storms, as the more they spin, not necessarily tornadoes, but tend to be our bigger hail producers. I'm talking about baseball-sized hail or larger. So it always helps to know exactly where your radar is in proximity to the storm to let you know exactly which way the colors are kind of going. Satellite imagery, again, if we lost every single radar across the country, say due to an EM situation, giant EM burst, terrestrial, and then it would wipe out all the technology we had. We still have satellites 22,300 miles out in space to look at, to use. In this case, you can see some of the bubbling of the atmosphere. It gets every minute, so it's really, really high resolution stuff, again, from way out in space. See some of the high resolution bubbling of the clouds, leading to showers and thunderstorms as it moves again from west to east. So kind of the high terrain begins to push the moisture upwards and develop clouds, showers, eventually thunderstorms. And then much like any normal summer day here in the Pikes Peak region, it kind of begins to drift off to the east across the plains, and you're just where the heaviest rains and the largest hail are produced, kind of right along that I-25 corridor, and then also moves farther east. Sometimes hail can be even bigger out there too. So really amazing technology. Again, resolution is tremendous. These things were launched, this particular GOES 16 and GOES 17 satellites were launched 3 to 4 years ago, providing us this absolutely detailed picture image of the atmosphere, again, at all hours of the day. So talk about our severe thunderstorms, tornadoes in general, wildfires again, depending on how much greenup we have this year. And if we have a continued stream of moisture, if we don't, all that green is going to become brown, leading to more fuels, leading to more potential fire threats this year. So if any of you live in the WUI or the wildland urban interface, make sure you have your protective areas around your houses or your structures. So that way you don't have something develops in your backyard or moves to your backyard and then your house is now under attack with that. And we'll get into that a little bit later on today too. And then flash floods, river floods as well. Obviously it could be from heavy rain or even from off the burn scars, such as the Waldo Canyon burn scar from several years ago. And then also winter storms, which we're kind of seeing one of those tonight. So again, the moisture is a very, very welcome sight in any form, other than hail. Hail, we don't want hail. We want to have the frozen as far as the snowfall or the liquid with the rain. And speaking of hail, this is the most common threat when it comes to severe weather in Colorado. And it's mostly due to our elevation. We're just that much closer to the freezing level within any particular storm. So areas farther east, lower elevations, a little bit lower, away from the freezing level, you could have some pretty good hail, but it could easily melt throughout, basically from base of the cloud down to the ground. It can melt and basically just be nice, big, giant, cold, wet raindrops. But here, we tend to see a lot of pea-sized hail during the transition seasons. You're getting into the fall, sometimes even into the spring, like we are now. We had some hail a couple of days ago, farther east, out towards Highway 24, covered the ground pretty good. Pea-sized hail, maybe even dime-sized hail at times too. So we're kind of getting into the season. This is why the Skywarn program is really big here in Colorado, starting in March through the early May, because once we get beyond May, we're kind of game on in terms of having severe weather potential almost on a daily basis. So some more storm structure, wall clouds. Wall clouds can be the preceding indicator for a possible tornado to then drop out of the sky, out of the base of that wall cloud into the ground, and then kind of does what it does. The big distinction between defining a wall cloud versus not is the fact that it's rotating. So if the entire storm itself is rotating, kind of like a top on a table, maybe not as quick as that, but nonetheless, it's still spinning. And most times here in the northern hemisphere, it's spinning in a counterclockwise, we call it cyclonic motion. And the wall cloud itself will begin to descend from that storm and then also begin to rotate. So if the cloud you're seeing that's below the base of a storm is not rotating, again, in any direction, counterclockwise or clockwise, more than likely it's not a wall cloud. More likely it's just a scud, or kind of like a scary looking cloud in a sense. But the wall cloud is going to be immediately to the left or right, depending on your vantage point of actually the rain shaft itself. So basically, as the storm is dropping rain or hail, the updraft is taking in that rain-cooled air back into the storm, kind of cycling it back up. Because it's a lot more moisture laden and also a little bit cooler, it tends to form clouds at a lower base. That's typically what leads to the wall clouds. Again, not every wall cloud produces a tornado, but some of the bigger storms that we've had here, the bigger supercells, again, the big storms that have large hail, tornadoes, flash flooding, kind of all combined in one, usually have a wall cloud preceding a tornado developing. And speaking of tornadoes, so when that cloud is still suspended within the atmosphere before it reaches the ground, it's considered a funnel cloud. The point that it actually makes impact, and like if you can visibly see dirt, debris, or dust being flung up, that's when contact is made, and that's when it's officially coined a tornado. So what you're seeing basically is the air around the tornado, and basically it's sucking up all this dirt and dust, and it kind of begins to form a condensation cone of various shapes and sizes. So wall cloud typically leads to tornadoes, but because we're in Colorado, we'll get into this a little bit later, that's not always the case. We always can have land spouts that don't really have that wall cloud rotating through. And land spouts are typically more higher frequency forms of rapidly or violently turning columns of air that reach the ground. Straight line winds, are going to be the second highest impact across the area. So you have the hail, damaging winds. So we measure winds typically 58 miles an hour or stronger, gust-wise, basically 50 knots or stronger, or wind damage that's visibly seen or produced, such as this, with a tree on top of a car. It could be telephone poles, snapped, could be outbuildings knocked over, destroyed, RVs, mobile homes also toppled over if they're not secured properly, that kind of stuff. That's what leads to the indication or for us to investigate damage when it comes to straight line winds. So if we have a big enough event and we're not entirely sure, if it's totally tornadic or straight line winds, we'll go out and actually do an investigation and evaluation of the damage to see the track and the path and kind of orientation of the damage in terms to determine if it's straight line winds versus tornadic, again, rotating winds there. And flash flooding, we've had several of these. I can think back, I wasn't before my time here in Colorado, but 2013 was a massive year in terms of flash flooding. And the fact that we had the freshly burned area up in Waldo Canyon did not help things because soil acted basically as concrete or asphalt, very impervious. It was so highly burned and scorched that the water could penetrate. So it's kind of ran downhill, into the creeks and other tributaries, leading to a rapid rise of water, which eventually overtopped the roads, could even wash the roads out. I think there was a fatality or two with that event, which is absolutely tragic, especially right there along the Highway 24 up through Ute Pass. So again, that's a pretty nasty corridor there. Again, right at the base of the Waldo Canyon in terms of flash flooding. And in any given summer day too, we can have intense enough rains that kind of cascade down the rock walls there in the valley and begin to kind of come down the creek and even the road surface as well too. So it really takes about 12 inches of swift moving water to lift your vehicle off the road surface, and then you're basically at the mercy of wherever the current's going to take you. So that's kind of why we say a couple of things, really. Turn around, don't drown. If you ever encounter an area that's completely flooded or submerged, you can see either it's standing water, you're not sure how deep it is, or even just a little bit of a current of water. Again, if you're not sure how deep it is, that road might no longer be there, driving into an open pit or a sinkhole. Or if it's quick enough, the water can easily overtake your car with the buoyancy that is providing and then sweep you downstream. That's usually how a lot of the fatalities occur, are in vehicles. So I think before we go on, are there any basic questions about what we just covered? I know it was maybe a little bit fast, but I want to make sure that we kind of get into simulations to kind of tie all this back in together. So happy to entertain any questions at this time, or if you want to wait till the very end, we can do that as well, but I'll take your lead, Lauren or Greg.
What I'd recommend people do is in the course of it, just put your questions in the chat window too, and then we'll cover them at the end. So carry on, Greg.
Okay, very good. So lightning safety. We have quite a bit of storms any given year here in Colorado. Teller, El Paso County, parts of southern Douglas and Arapahoe and Jefferson County, all kind of the hotbed in terms of the highest lightning activity in the state. And that's due to several things. I mean, obviously, higher terrain is going to really help force moisture up to form clouds and then eventually thunderstorms, which will then produce cloud-to-ground lightning. But we also have convergence from the west and also from the east too, so we kind of get both slopes into play in terms of how we develop showers and thunderstorms, and the fact that it's one of the more highly populated corridors too across the Front Range on each side of the states, leads to possible, fatalities with those cloud-to-ground bolts. One lightning bolt can measure 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit, so basically it's hotter than the face of the sun. Obviously not the corona. The corona is a couple million degrees Fahrenheit, but nonetheless, it's plasma. So it's really hot. It would hurt quite a bit, I imagine. I've never been struck. Fingers crossed, I never will be struck. So there's certain precautions, obviously, you should take when you are caught outside, during a lightning storm or a thunderstorm in general, I should say, is that make sure you're not the tallest object in that location. If you're in an open field and you cannot get to your vehicle and you can't get underground someplace, don't go under a tree, because usually that tree is the tallest object, and that's a pretty easy conduit for the bolt energy to kind of come down through the tree and then down through the trunk and into the root system and across the ground current, and then you're standing right under the tree, so either a branch falls on you or you get shocked by the ground current itself. So not a good place. So open field, you try to get as low as you possibly can to the ground and kind of stick your butt up in the air if you can. Make yourself as small as possible. But again, that's an absolute last resort. So you want to try to get into a more sturdy shelter. A vehicle is a great place, just especially a vehicle that's not a soft top, not a convertible, not a Wrangler with a canvas top, because that's just going to easily penetrate through the roof of the lightning bolt. So hard shelled top, preferably metal, help conduct the current around the vehicle and into the tires and into the ground, so that way you're totally grounded in terms of that. So lightning can strike anywhere from 10 to 15 miles away from a storm itself too. So the big key is, as you see there in the upper right hand side, is that when thunder roars, go indoors, because if you can hear rumble of thunder, then you are close enough to be struck by that lightning bolt. And if you do hear something and you can get inside to a safe place, the 30-30 rule, basically wait 30 minutes. And if there's nothing happens within that 30-minute time period, you can resume your normal activity. But if you're at minute 25, 5 minutes to go until you can resume, and you hear a rumble of thunder, you see an actual flash, your 30-minute timer starts all over again. You can see from the base of where the storm is, you can see all the clear air there. That's kind of where the updraft is. And this giant bolt came out the top. Basically, it's a positive bolt. The positive bolts come out of the top of the anvil due to the ionization of the storm. And this is anywhere from, again, 10 to 15 miles away from the base of the storm. It might not look like it in the picture, but Steve Hodanish, one of our forecasters, is a big storm chaser. He goes out east quite a bit. So I take his word as gospel in terms of the setup of this picture here. But again, it just goes to show you that, if you can hear it, you're close enough to be struck by lightning, because again, they can strike many, many miles away from the actual storm itself. So tornado and severe storm safety in general, the pictures here indicate basically a split level or a bi-level house. The entire top floor is gone. So really not a safe refuge. So anywhere kind of below, the lowest floor possible, underground possible too. And once you get to that area, you kind of want to have protective action as well too. Kind of get on your knees and kind of cover your back of your head. Your vital organs kind of keep nice and tight with your hands and your head kind of crouched down. That way, if any flying debris were to come in, and obviously not inflicting any bigger wounds other than to your back, which would be bad enough if it is, but let alone your vital organs on the front side of you too. So it's a very, very kind of gory topic. I'm not a medical professional by any means, but I've seen some things, and it is not pretty when it comes to tornado damage and people being injured by flying debris. It's something as simple as dirt or even grains of sand just impaling them due to the high winds. So there's some really, really horrible, do not recommend ever kind of options, and there are some really, really good ones that, yes, we want you to go to. So mobile homes, vehicles trying to outrun a storm, using the overpass as a protective area to kind of shield you from the rain and the strong winds and any other debris. It's not a good place because that underpass acts kind of as a funnel, so it actually increases the wind speed. But nonetheless, if you have someone, family member who's behind you, kind of following you, and you pull over and they keep going, well, you actually begin to create a traffic jam under that overpass. We see it a lot, especially in the plains when it comes to hail, that people are trying to escape the hailstorm, and they actually park under an overpass, and all it does is create a giant several mile long traffic jam. So people then are literally put in harm's way. They're literally sitting ducks. Other bad options, large open rooms with no protection. There's really not a lot of space between the walls. Sometimes it could be cinder block walls or just like an open metal sheathing roof that could just kind of come down. There's really nothing really helping to anchor it in place, and the walls are usually not all that thick or reinforced. So basically put as many walls between you and the outside world as possible, and that's what we want to see you do. So kind of a more confined space, such as an interior room, hallway, closets, bathroom. If you have a basement, great. If you're on a slab, you're going to find an interior hallway closet with preferably no windows. Bathroom, you have a couple windows, so be it. But you get into the bathtub and you take a couple blankets or pillows and kind of cover yourself in those and kind of hunker down in there. And then, a lot of people around here do not have a tornado shelter. We don't typically have the kind of storms, especially this far west in Colorado, to really have a necessity for a tornado room or a very, very strong structured room separate from just like your basement in particular. I've had a few middle, maybe high-end storms, but they've been mostly basically from kind of out in Lamar and Prowers County area, but obviously over in Kansas, and obviously Windsor in 2008 was a really big one farther north. But nonetheless, those situations are very, very rare. And tornadoes in general are more of a rare situation as well too. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. So knowing where to go, having that plan before the season begins. So, if tomorrow we issue a tornado warning, using that split-second knowledge, having those plans you've already prepared for and put into action, kind of like a fire drill. This is like more of a severe weather or tornado drill, where you're going to go. Is it going to be into your basement? Is it going to be to the hallway closet? Are you going to try to make a run for it? Which, again, don't necessarily advise. So you're going to go out there and try to look for the storm. Don't necessarily advise it either, although I completely understand the desire to want to see a tornado. I totally get it. As long as you're very, very safe about it, but I'm never going to condone you bringing it in the harm's way. My wife would kill me if I did that. So And then it said flood safety and turn around, don't drown, because you see this road here. Well, I mean, how deep is that water? How, those pylons you see there on the right-hand side, like exactly how tall are they? Is this an open field? Is this a active stream where the stream comes under the road surface there? Is there a culvert that's now been washed away? There's too many unknowns to the situation that you don't necessarily want to put your car through there. And basically, you're like the Oregon Trail, you're now fording the river. And then again, wherever that current's taking you, well, that's where you're going to end up. And hopefully you make it to the end point, alive. But again, more than half of the fatalities when it comes to flood occur in vehicles, people trying to cross roadways such as this. Their car goes in and goes down right away into a giant sinkhole, or again, it hits the water. Basically the buoyancy begins to carry it off, and then it's drifting at the mercy of the current. Yeah. So again, barriers are there for a reason. If you drive one around one of those, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a pretty hefty fine if you do so, because they're there to protect you. They're not there to impede you. Well, they are there to impede you. They're there to direct you someplace else. Do not go through that direction. Do not go through that, in this case, low water crossing. So knowing where low water crossings across the area that you constantly traverse is a good thing, because then you can have a better gauge in terms of how deep that water might be if there are no markers there next to a low water crossing. And if you think it's too deep, then yes, turn around, and don't drown, go another way. If it's a few inches and you know for sure it's a few inches, continue on then. So again, the culvert was here, and then the culvert got swept away due to a flash flood, and then the road got taken with the culvert. So again, if this was covered in water, you couldn't see the bottom. You couldn't see exactly if that road was still there. So you could be driving into that open pit that that used to be a culverted road. It's no longer there. So then you become a statistic, which we don't want you to become a statistic. So a little bit of that reporting overview. So you do it as soon as you feel comfortable. Again, we're not telling you to put yourselves in harm's way. We're not telling you to run out there and use a payphone when the water's up to your neck. That's not the point. Your point is to report when you can, when your safety is totally accounted for. Again, we'll never condone, we'll never ask you to go out there and chase a tornado and go out there and stand in a hailstorm like this until it hits you in the face and then ask you how big the hailstone was. So you can always wait. Tell us hail's falling, estimate how big it is, great. And then once storm's passed, if you have some hailstones left, go out there, measure, give us a call back and say, hey, I had 2.5 inch, I had tennis ball size hail falling with this past storm. That kind of deal. Never put yourself in harm's way. We'll never ask you to do that. Try to remain clear, concise, and calm. When it comes to severe thunderstorms, people get very, very excited and antsy. And whether it's because they have an absolute fear of them or they absolutely love them, they talk a mile a minute. One of the great storm chasers, Jeff Petrowski, I don't know if any of you know him or have heard of him, but there was an event, I'm trying to think, it was 2 years ago out near Shivington, out in Kiowa County, that he was chasing on. I was one of the first people to talk to him after the storms had passed through, and I could not understand a word that he said. He was beyond amped up. So he was not clear, concise, or calm. That was his adrenaline going, every ounce of his adrenaline was going out at the same time. So that was really tough for me to understand exactly what was happening. If I needed to have a warning out or a continual warning that was already out, because I just could not get through to him and he could understand him. Plus, it was kind of a bad cell area. So try to keep it clear, concise, and calm, and just try to relax. And it was tougher in some situations than others to try to relax during a severe weather episode. But again, if we can't get information out of you that we can understand, that doesn't really help us continue our mission of saving lives and property. So a good example of when you call us, again, I'll give you a number as well too for those who don't know our 800 number or who don't use the net at least, but your name, try to give your exact location, someplace that's easy to find on a map. You describe the event, again, whether it's hail, damaging winds, if you actually measured a wind gust, or if you see a tornado or a wall cloud or a funnel cloud. Again, kind of what direction from where you're standing it was. So say you're in Colorado Springs, say you're on Pikes Peak Ave and you're looking due east, say, 4 miles to my east, I see a funnel cloud developing from this location here. That's very specific, and that's very, very good information for us to kind of train our eyes on a particular location within a storm that's due east of downtown Colorado Springs. And I try to be as specific as possible. Again, you could say, whether it was hail, how long it lasted, what basically the largest size hail that you did receive. Anything you think is pertinent to the situation, to your surroundings, and to the actual storm itself is highly valuable to what we need, again, to have better warnings for that location or farther downstream to warn those. Excuse me, a little ingestion. So when you report hail, you need to report basically the widest hail, the widest axis possible. And I'll show you an example of exactly, kind of a quirky looking hailstone. It basically wants you to report hail size that's penny size or larger. When we do the daily nets, basically starting up here relatively soon, I think about another month or so, through usually the end of August. Depending on the data situation, we can adjust the size hail that we need. If these could be a really big hail day, we're pretty much going to say, only report to us quarter size hail, basically inch size hail or larger. We don't necessarily need everything below that because it's going to be a lot of it in general. Or if it's more of a marginal situation, penny, nickel size hail on up, could do it for the day. Kind of, again, if we get some smaller hail mixed in within a storm, it kind of helps us determine, okay, the storm could increase and begin producing larger hailstones, or it's kind of already winding down, probably going to be producing some smaller, P or BB size kind of hailstones, that kind of stuff. But we don't necessarily want you reporting marble, because marble is not really indicative of a marble. Marbles come in all different shapes, basically. Not sizes, not shapes, sizes. Sizes, the shape's always the same, right? It's a marble. So the sizes are going to be different. So larger, up, down to smaller ones. And again, that correlates to different size coinage. So marble does not do us any good. See the list here on the right-hand side. We have BBs. Never really heard of a BB size hail before, but P size hail is really, really common here. I think most of you understand that. All the way up to grapefruit size hail. And the one we had 2 years ago out, and I think it was Bethune, was 4.75 inches in diameter. Supposedly it was the largest hailstone ever to be retrieved in Colorado. So it's a little surprising that it'll be like much, much bigger than that. But nonetheless, it's still a really big hailstone. There's also a hail card that you can take with you, print out, you can laminate it. And it's a nice handy, gives you a nice quick ruler. Again, penny size, nickel size, and quarter size, and a scale from 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches. So you can actually use this and lay it next to the hailstone itself to kind of get a quick reference in terms of how big that hail was. Again, after the storm has already moved through, unless you can go out there and run and grab a handful and kind of measure on your kitchen counter. But again, don't want to push those in harm's way with active hail and lightning falling. Because again, we don't want you to be, a statistic. And that 1-800 number, 888-1540, answered all the time. This is a dedicated spotter phone line. So what I ask is do not disseminate that number out to your friends and family who are not certified spotters. When that line in our office rings and lights up, we know the person on the other end of that phone is a Weather Service certified spotter or trained spotter. So again, if you hand it out to your neighbor who has no idea what he's talking about, or she doesn't know what she's talking about, that can really muddy the better reports that we're getting. So again, do not get the number out, please. So either call us, or have to be on a net that day. You can use the net to also get us information down to our office relatively quickly as well. So what to report in terms of damaging winds? Again, if you have measured winds, if you have an anemometer, a way to measure winds either at your house, your office, your business, or if you're out on the road and you have a handheld one, try to take as high up in the air as possible, kind of get rid of that frictional component towards the ground. 58 miles an hour or stronger is considered severe. Again, only if it's measured. Don't try to estimate. Physical damage is far from the winds. Again, trees knocked over, limbs snapped. Try to give us an idea of what kind of diameter the tree limb that was snapped was. Really helps to relay back reports to us in terms of the severity of that storm. When it comes to the wall clouds, again, you're going to have a rotating base of that wall cloud. It's going to be an appendage that kind of drops down from the base of the actual storm itself. Sometimes people say it's more of like a pyramid-shaped orientation, but again, it has to be rotating. If it's not rotating, it's not really a true wall cloud. It's again more of just scud or something very kind of innocuous in a sense. And then even a funnel cloud too, again, before it actually descends to the ground and become a tornado, that funnel cloud could descend all the way to the ground and become a tornado and begin to produce damage. But again, as far as tornadoes go, anytime you can see, contact, whether it's the actual entirety of the column of air reaching the ground and kicking up dust and debris around, as you can see there on the video on the right-hand side, pretty nicely defined cone shaped tornado there, and all the debris and dust kind of flying around the base of it and being lofted into the air. So that is what we really want to know about when it's occurring and kind of where it's occurring. Again, be specific as you possibly can when it comes to reporting one of these things. As far as flash flooding goes, I mean, again, we don't necessarily want you wading in to the water. Say, you're basically knee-high deep water. Well, I mean, one thing, how tall are you? But again, we don't put you in harm's way, because if it's flood waters, especially if it's in an urban area, it's not clean water. And that can lead to disease, especially if you have any open wounds or cuts or abrasions, any exposed skin, or even if not exposed skin. That can lead to bigger issues for you. So again, we don't necessarily want you going in and wading in the water to give us a depth, but if you can try to estimate in terms of, okay, well, it's a few inches above the curbs, on both sides of the streets, or it's half up my driveway. My driveway sits about 5 feet above the road surface, whatever it might be. That's really important to us. That really helps us gauge exactly how severe it is. And then again, any water covering a roadway, if you come to it and you have to stop because it's completely submerged in water. If you see any actually roads buckling or roads washed out, again, that's a flash flood to us. That's what we want to know. So a very, very simple diagram in terms of submitting a report, kind of what you should do, what kind of technique or methodology you should use to report it to us. Ask yourself, is it life-threatening? And if it's yes, simply just give us a call direct or hop on the net. Because the net, again, it's constantly running in our office. We hear that repeater being used all the time, especially when it is up and running. So we'll hear reports come in, and we know obviously a lot of you use the breaking code to get in a critical report like that. But that's very, very fast, quick, efficient way of getting us reports. If it's not life-threatening, if it's some smaller hail, if it's heavier snow, slick roads, more of a nuisance kind of flood situation, or a couple branches gone down, or you have gusts, you measure gusts at 50 miles an hour. That's significant gust, but it's not necessarily considered life-threatening. So, you have many other options or ways to contact us. We can do the social media accounts, Facebook and Twitter, at NWS Pueblo for both Facebook and Twitter. Send reports. Still, definitely give us a call. We'll never not answer that phone. But you have other ways to get a hold of us in terms of non-life-threatening situations when it comes to reporting weather phenomena to us. So again, 800 number there. Tell us what you witnessed, where it was witnessed, and give us a time. If you happen to notice what time it is now in terms of your reports, give us that time and let us know. That way, again, we can really focus our attention on that storm, provide the best warnings possible for that area and those downstream becoming impacted by that storm. So social media accounts, again, at NWS Pueblo. They're constantly monitored, much like the weather radio stream and channel is, as well as the weather net is constantly monitored too. So I think most of you know these frequencies. And again, I apologize for maybe a little bit of miscommunication earlier regarding what Sid had given me as far as Cheyenne Mountain repeater goes. But this is basically what we'll be using this upcoming convective season until they get the Pikes Peak fixed. And NWS.Pueblo, again, a good way to send us pictures. So even after the storm passes by and you have really good pictures you could not get uploaded to social media, you really want to share them with us. Snowfall, snow drifts, hail pictures covering the ground, whatever, send them to us too, because we can always use these for further analysis, or even do like a nice web story write-up and give you full credit for this picture's information. Not as cool as sending them to the TV stations. You get your name broadcast all over the TV screens. I get that's really neat too, but we can still use pictures in terms of having good, again, weather write-ups and sharing them on our social media accounts as well too, for future weather awareness weeks or just future research in general too. All right, so I think before we get into the spying simulation, I'd like to take maybe say a 2-minute break, if you don't mind, gentlemen, so I can get some more water in my throat and my lips that are very, very parched right now. Is that okay?
Sounds great. We'll wait for you.
Okay, thank you.
So in the chat window, we posted a site where you can sign up for either one of the upcoming 2 classes.
Okay. Cool.
I know we've got a number of guys up there. So you heard that earlier on, Greg. But I think there's a number of others that have probably been through the training and have spotter numbers.
Yeah, I think a lot of this might be, old hat to a lot of you out there. And again, that's why I really appreciate you having me on tonight. I think it's just a good refresher for folks, but I really wanted to also push this simulation aspect to it. It's not like really, really cool as CGI simulation, not 3D, like Weather Channel related stuff, but let's kind of run you through a couple of scenarios. It's giving a lot more interactive, like in terms of, how would you report information to us based on what you're seeing, what we're going to show you tonight to give us the best report possible. So that's where I'd like to open up, the conversation to everybody who's out there tonight listening and watching is during this next part here. All right. I think I'm good. I think I'm good to go. All right, so again, this is our very first attempt trying to do this in terms of this year. We've done this a few times, the previous classes, the virtual classes. It went pretty well, but it's a learning experience. So there could be a few hiccups, for us all. Present you a scenario, and I'll show you a little bit of video as it shows here. And then I'll ask you to provide the best report you possibly can, again, with the obviously you're not calling our office right now, but basically the what it is, the where it is, and the when it is, and try to be specific as possible. So either you can hop on the phone or hop on the Zoom audio and do it, or type it in the chat, however you prefer to do it. But just want this to be really interactive because we're really striving for getting the best information out of you all possible, again, for our life safety mission. So a quick warm-up, show you a picture, and then like I said, what would you report from the following images? So first one, again, open line, tractor trailer. Looks like maybe 2 of them semis, maybe a box truck, tipped over. Say we're Highway 24 out near Peyton. What would you report? Anybody?
Strong winds.
Strong winds. Strong winds where? Exactly. So there's no mile marker that you can see in this picture, but you can say strong winds. You're heading, say east on Highway 24 towards Peyton. Something like that. Something specific like that is a big help to us because the storm could have moved through 30 minutes prior. And now it's like basically over in Kiowa County or wherever it might be. So just having the location that you're located, what you're seeing is helpful. But again, trying to give us which direction you're traveling, maybe where the tipped over tractor trailer is, east or westbound side of the highway. That information, again, that's what's really crucial to us, especially if the storm has already had moved through. All right, so besides the Eckerd still in existence, what would you report here?
Go, Bob.
Flash flooding in front of Eckerd on Main Street, approximately 2:00 in the afternoon.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure how this picture is, honestly. I mean, Eckerd, my goodness. It's been around for many years that I can remember. But yes, exactly right. So location, if you know what street you're on, great. Time of day is fantastic, and basically kind of what you're seeing in general. So thank you. That's good. Right on. Okay. So remember earlier I mentioned when you're measuring hailstones, think about that. Think about how you measure a hailstone. So in this case, what would you report? And you can take a guess in terms of relationship to the, over here you got a quarter, and over here you got a dime.
You would measure the longest distance from point to point.
Correct. Exactly right. So I think in this case, these actually were 1.75 hailstones. So you're talking basically golf ball size hailstones. But again, they look very, very peculiar, to say the least. They're not spherical like most stones are, or even spiky. They look more like dinosaur-shaped hailstones. Okay. All right, so here we go now into the first of 3 simulations. So scenario, I'll eventually have to read this to you, but I can if you'd like me to. But basically, you're traveling north on highway on I-25. Storm's way ahead of you. So again, you're the driver, so you don't look at the radar. You don't take your eyes off the road, especially as you're approaching a storm. And then you see this. Oh, I'm sorry. Let the entire video play through to kind of see if there's anything that towards the end of it you might, need to see before you make your reports. Right now it's turning on to Mesa Ridge Parkway. He's got his blinker on. That's a good thing, too. Okay, so that's where it ends. So, what kind of report would you send into our office, seeing that? If I want to venture a guess, or take, not a guess, but give us your best report. A few questions for you. Is what you saw, is that reportable? If yes, what do you report? And then how would you report it? Would you call us, social media, whichever?
It may be my video, but I'm not seeing any rotation out of that. And therefore, you want a reportable wall cloud rotating, and I didn't see any rotation out of that.
Okay. So you would not report that.
I don't think, well, based upon what you said earlier, you want a rotating wall cloud, and that was not it.
No, exactly right. So basically, I'm putting you all in the hot seat. These are decisions that we have to make as warning operators when it comes to looking at radar data to pull a trigger based off of what you're seeing. Now, there are a couple of things that we look at. We look at the atmosphere in general. Is it conducive for large hail damaging winds or tornadoes? And then do we have reports of it, verified reports, photographic, videographic proof, and or are our spotters saying, hey, this is like kind of happening, kind of bad. Like, here's what's going on out here. That helps us lead to a warning or not issuance as well, too, based off of just our own kind of, in a sense, gut check, too. So that's what I'm asking you. I'm asking you what you just saw. Would you report it? And if you would, what would it be? But if not, then you do not report it.
Well, if I was reporting anything, I'd say I saw a cloud lowering and I detected no rotation. That's what I would report in that situation, Greg.
Okay. Yep. Okay. That sounds good. Anybody else?
I don't hear anybody differing. I didn't see any rotation either. So
okay.
So what about the hail? I think there were a few hailstones coming down, but I from the video couldn't judge how big they were.
Okay. So are you seeing hail like was falling in front of you or like off distance in the storm itself?
I think it was hitting the windshield, wasn't it?
Okay. I saw some maybe raindrops with it. I'm not sure we were that close to the storm to have the hail core over us. But obviously if there was hail, would you call that in?
If it was big enough, if it was bigger than a penny, penny or bigger.
Okay. Sure. Great. Absolutely great. So yes. So again, situations that we're seeing nowadays, when it comes to spotters or even, based off of, live streams from area cameras, but not as clear cut. And this kind of leads to that too. So here you are driving. You can't look at the radar. You can't see if the storm has any rotation to begin with. At least you shouldn't be looking at the radar. You should be focusing on the road. Again, you're driving. So if you pull over and take a look at the radar, it's a different story. But in this case, there wasn't really much rotation with it. But it's a situation where it's very, very good to keep your eye on it and see if it begins to circulate or rotate. And therefore, that would be stronger evidence to then give us a call. Now you're seeing a rotating wall cloud too. Now, the rotation of a wall cloud can be slow and kind of subtle, but as long as it actually is based off your vantage point and based off of your vision in terms of how it is rotating, any slight movement or rotation with it is considered a rotating wall cloud. If it's just stagnant, kind of just lofting, the storm moves, say, from west to east, the clouds themselves just kind of move west to east and don't really have any kind of rotation with them at all, then it's more scud and, again, therefore more innocuous. So later on, this storm did begin to rotate quite severely. I don't think a tornado was ever produced by it as it headed off well to the east of I-25, but there was some large hail with this storm that did develop.
Well, Greg, in that point, would you want somebody to report a lowering cloud without rotation?
You definitely can, absolutely, because again, that's going to help us keep an eye on it, because we're not necessarily be seeing it on radar, or the rotation is like severely broad. It's not close and tight enough to really warrant anything, just more situational awareness for us. But as meteorologists, we are complete and total data hogs. So any report that you give us, we will gladly take it and then assess that information to further watch the storm, interrogate it, or eventually even pull a trigger on a warning for that particular storm. Never, ever be shy to give us a report based off what you're seeing, even if you don't think it's completely and totally needed or required. Now, I say that I don't want you calling for just every single shower or storm that you do see. I want there to be a little bit more meat to the report, because again, Colorado does tend to get a lot of thunderstorms during the summer months. But if you are completely unsure in terms of whether that cloud is rotating, but you are seeing a distinct lowering, and that was a very distinct lowering from the base of that storm, but you're too far away to be able to tell if it's rotating or not. Maybe as you got closer, you could see better rotation with it. But still, that's good information for us to know that the storm is producing something that looks a little bit odd, and maybe something that needs to be monitored a little bit further, interrogated further. All right, number 2. So you see the storms popping up near your location. You check your favorite radar app, weather software, whatever it might be. You see these following images on the app. So again, reflectivity to the left-hand side is going to show you the intensity of the storm again, the pinks and the reds, and more high intense rainfall. The pinks typically represent more so water-coated hailstones falling through the storm itself. And then right-hand side there, you have your base velocity. So right now we're looking at the lowest elevation angle, which is the 0.5 angle from the radar. And out here, say Shivington and Eads, you're looking at about 8,000 feet above the ground level at this point in time. So again, kind of take these in a little bit, look for certain signatures you might be aware of when it comes to, storm structure, maybe the hail or any rotation, the greens and reds kind of next to each other and kind of the same location, again, indicates some low-level spinning within the storm itself. I'll give you 10 more seconds to look at that before we move on to the questions. All right. So now part of the scenario, you notice there's a storm, supercell, because there's a bit of rotation with it, and you think you can get to a place that has a safe location to monitor the storm. And assume, again, here the road's oriented north to south, say Highway 1. So Highway 1 is the road that you are taking to monitor this storm. So again, same storm. I'm gonna go ahead and mute it because I think he's a little, it's not vulgar, it's just he kind of maybe gives it away as to what's going on.
Yeah, it's a funnel cloud, but I don't see any debris yet.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So I'll pause it right now. So yeah, you can see kind of like one of the smoother edges here of the storm, of the cloud. And again, that smooth edge. The reason it's smooth is because it's rotating. So again, not necessarily sure how far you are from this particular funnel cloud, as you mentioned, Jim. But nonetheless, it is a funnel cloud, and it is descending from the base of a storm here. So let's continue playing it a little bit more.
One of the keys, though, was if you looked at that radar in the two intense reflection pictures on the left side, if you looked at the right side, there was a definite red and green, which was indicating rotation. So, from looking at the radar, looking at the picture, I'm going to be a little suspicious of what I see out there as far as rotation is concerned.
You're going to get a little excited, get your spidey sense going. I gotcha.
Did that go away?
Nope, I still hear you. I think your video is cutting in and out, but your audio is still good.
I'm sorry there. My internet got unstable. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Go speed up a little bit more. There we go. Oh, did you see that? I think there was a flash of lightning over here.
I can't tell if it's
maybe
or hail or something.
Yeah, I couldn't tell either. I saw a flash in the corner of my eye too. Okay.
I've been watching like 6 or 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah, you see this nice defined. I mean, it looks like right here by the tree line, like it's hard to tell exactly. It's really hard to tell if it actually is reaching the ground. Totally understand that, but you can see a nice defined vortex. The nice smooth edges, descending towards the ground here. And looks like it's starting to kind of maybe weaken a little bit and kind of rope out. And then almost vanished. Either it dissipated or it became occluded by the rain here in the foreground too. So there are a couple of factors at play for you when interrogating that storm. So what you saw, is that reportable to us? If yes, how would you report it? What would you report back to our office?
Maybe
Well, let's see. If that way we were headed, cars were passing us to the south was the initial report. So we were headed north. That would have been off to our east. It's hard to estimate the distance. I would say I saw a funnel cloud. I did not necessarily observe any debris. It may have very well touched down, but I couldn't verify that. And if I could get it,
click.
And lightning.
and lightning. But if I could get a word in edgewise on the repeater, I might have reported that.
Okay, no, that's good. So this is kind of like whose line is anyway, where the points are made up and it doesn't really matter. So Jim, you get 1,000,000 points for that response. That was a great report. That's exactly, try to be precise, as possible, specific as possible with orientation, where you're looking, basically what you're seeing and observing at that time. So, fantastic. All right. So last one, here we go, number 3. Oh, hang on, back, there we go. So again, that's you right there. You're that blue circle. Here you are. So you're just south of, you're basically Kit Carson and Eads, right between the two of them. Storm, say, is heading basically your direction based off of the animation of this line of storms. You can see kind of how noisy and messy it is here on the front side of a storm. Highway 287, again, runs north-south. So based off of what you're seeing here, again, this is the base velocity data from our KPUX radar, again, out in rural Pueblo County. Again, and you're the blue circle. Think about what you might expect to see. Okay, so based off those images there. Now, something interesting happens. So you take your cell phone, as you pull over on the road, you begin to chase this thing, and you notice this. He's playing Bruce Springsteen, by the way, so Born to Run, for those of you who care.
Well, that's what I was going to say when you asked me what I saw. I was going to say I saw it in my rearview mirror as I was getting out of there.
Understandable. His camera work needs a little bit of work. Steve, he chases quite a few times when he's not working shift at the office, and he loves going out there, going to ChaserCon and when it existed, and doing all these things that a chaser would do. So as we get through the simulation, as it ends, and we kind of discuss what it is, I'm taking his entire word as gospel. Again, he was there, so I value his word as to what he saw. But with that being said, is what you saw there in that video that you took, was that reportable? And if so, give me a good report to our office.
Well, Greg, I have a couple of questions there. I did not see necessarily a wall cloud there, okay? And let's see, I would be driving north, so that would be slightly to the northwest of me. Could that have been a land spout more than a tornado?
That's a very, very good point, Jim. And yes, based off of that video that you just saw, it's hard to tell exactly if there's a connection to a wall cloud or even to the base of the parent thunderstorm itself. So based off of your evidence, the video as well as what you saw on the radar, would that lead you to the conclusion that the storm is rotating that could produce a tornado, or is it a non-rotating storm that may produce more of a land spout situation? Because again, that's the big distinction between the two when it comes to land spout versus tornado. The tornado has that parent mesocyclone, the parent spinning updraft of these tornadoes, whereas a land spout, they can form with just really an ordinary thunderstorm.
Well, I did see some red and green on the radar, which indicates you had a rotating storm. But what was that, Steve?
It felt like it was in an odd shape. The ratio of red to green, and not really as circular. I don't know.
So it was noisy. Yes, I agree. It was very noisy.
What might help is to have you tell us what you observed in the radar. We can understand a little more about what we're looking at. That was an interesting.
I understand. Nope, I get it. So the first question now, you see that happening in open field. Is that reportable? Yes or no, Steve? Would you report that episode to us? Whether you define it as a tornado, dust devil, land spout, would you report that still to our office?
Well, it says tornado or funnel cloud, and there's no wind damage that we could see, so I'm not sure it is.
Okay.
Then again, it's wonderfully interesting. I like Jim's comment about I don't see a big.
Yeah, but you're data hog, so we're going to report it to you.
That's great. No, yes. So in this case, we like you to report that. As odd as it might seem, not having the full picture, say in this case, due to the roof of the car, not be able to see a connection to the cloud base or whatever it might be, but it still helps, give us an area to monitor, or even issue a warning, tornado warning possibly on it. Because even with the land spouts, we're going to issue tornado warnings on them because it still can produce damage and destruction. Granted, the entire system is a little different, how it's comprised and how the storms originate, the land spout tornado, I should say. But again, it's still considered a life-threatening situation. So we still, like to have you report this.
Good. Did we
as far as what? Sorry, go ahead.
Did we see anything that indicated scale of that spout?
Say one more time. You broke up there a little bit. I'm sorry.
Did we see anything that indicated scale of that spout? I don't recall seeing structures.
No, correct. So again, the big thing in terms of when it comes to tornado versus land spout is going to be, we can see the rotation, as you saw there in the radar image. We can see the greens and reds kind of combined. Even it was messy, but there still is rotation within the storm itself. So that lead us to believe it's a supercell, and they typically are the ones that produce tornadoes versus land spouts, which again are just really any ordinary thunderstorm that can produce a tornado-like structure without the parent spinning updraft. So again, that's why land spouts are really, really hard for us to issue warnings with ample lead time, because we can't see the storm rotating. They kind of just really drop out of the base of the storm, and then by the time it's on the ground, when people see it, it's when we issue the warning. So the warning is always going to be a 0-minute lead time because of that.
Okay.
I guess
it's unfortunate. So
now, go ahead, Lauren.
I was going to say, based on what you've been saying, I guess if I were to report this, I would, describe the fact that we've got strong wind rotation on the ground, but perhaps an ill-defined funnel.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. No, that would be a very, very good good report, and it's something we can definitely work on. Because again, too, so radar was showing you the rotation, but I mentioned before that the elevation of what we're seeing with the storm is about 8,000 feet above the ground.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so we're not really near ground level. So a lot can be happening from 8,000 feet to ground level, and something like this, being as small as it is, we're never going to be able to resolve that with any radar. Plus, the radar can't see the ground itself, so that defeats the purpose of anything touching the ground. That's why the spotters are immensely important to our operations when it comes to severe weather.
Now, you showed us two different radar pictures. I was unable to build anything super interesting in my imaging mind because I couldn't really tell how to read it to understand where the radar physically was in those pictures.
Okay.
How do you learn that? How do you tell that from the pictures we're looking at?
Gotcha. I understand. Well, so
insider information, where it is.
So in this case, in this one in particular, this is zoomed into a storm. We know we're out in Kiowa County, and our radar is in this radar. The image taken from our radar is in northeast Pueblo County. So we know the radar is going to be basically to the left of this immediate storm, by out to several miles. But that's where it is. So again, the cool colors are coming basically east to west towards the radar, again, which is in Pueblo County. And then in this case, the warms are moving from west to east away from the radar. If you look at a map in general, when it comes to, say, this image, if I zoomed out on this image, and you would see all of southern Colorado, either there's going to be an identifier, KPUX for our radar, or there'll be literally like a black hole. And that's the dome of the radar, because the radar cannot see really above itself. So basically, it's called the cone of silence.
Oh, okay.
So basically, that black donut hole is where the radar location is going to be, and then from there, you can distinguish movement of in this case, the scatterers or hygrometers towards or away based off the colors, based on the proximity to where the radar is. So.
Okay.
Greg, in that image, the rotation looks to be kind of on the southwest side of the activity. Is that doesn't seem to me to be typical? Isn't it more? Wouldn't it be more to the east and maybe a little north of a cell like that, where the funnels present? Typical.
I understand. I understand. Typically, the storms are actually going to form more so in I would say the west-southwest quadrant of a storm, as far as this go with the tornadoes, and all based off of where the best moisture feeding is, and basically how much shear. When I say shear, I mean the magnitude difference going from ground upwards, the intensity, basically the vector of the wind, both magnitude and direction can change, providing a turning over of the atmosphere. And that turning of the atmosphere, when it gets hit by an updraft, begins to turn vertically, and as it turns vertically, it stretches out. As it stretches out, conservation of angular momentum, it's going to spin faster. Like the figure skater example, arms out versus arms in. Same principle applies to the atmosphere. It's the physics behind it. So as you stretch that column of air from the horizontal into the vertical, and the updraft begins to pull it farther and farther up to the atmosphere, stretches and spins faster and faster and faster. And that's typically how tornadogenesis occurs. Now, obviously not every storm produces a tornado. So the science in terms of why some storms you see here in front of you form them versus ones that look a lot better don't, it's still a lot of research and early science being brought into that. That's only going to really be obtained by some high-end computer modeling, as well as better empirical evidence, hitting a storm to get better sampling with what's happening within the storm itself too. So quite a bit. It's kind of like the whole Twister thing. You basically shove the car and the Dorothy into it, or the Toto into it to get the sampling, what's happening, updrafts and downdrafts and microbursts and this and that. So it's still a pretty early science in its infancy in terms of tornadogenesis goes. But in this case, the best moisture was south, and the best shear was also south. So typically on the south side of the storm, you have the best moisture and shear feed into it. That's going to be the strongest part of the storm there.
Interesting.
Fantastic. Well, that is all I had. You all did very, very well. I know it's also, kind of late after 9 o'clock now, but I really appreciate your time tonight and kind of let me run through this. And you gave me some good things to take back as far as making these simulations a little bit better as well too. So again, our HANA number, if you have a Hail card, it's on there. If not, I'll get you one of those.
No.
And happy to entertain the questions you have for me at this time.
Greg, I think the simulations are very important in this thing. When Jennifer did her classes a couple of times and took over for Tom, she tried to put in some of these simulations. And I think it really helps us because, not all of us are trained like you are. And we're looking out there and going, what are we seeing? What do we need to report? And this helps us a whole lot with that. And I think it's a good thing that it's been added into the program. I really liked it.
No, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. And I agree. Again, and based off of my evidence from last year, we got some pretty awful duds reports from folks. And it wasn't anyone from the ham community. It was some chasers or wannabe meteorologists who just didn't know exactly what they were looking at. It's giving us some bad information, which led to some bad warnings. So we want to drive home the fact that, these are some of the more, nebulous and fluid conditions you're going to see out there, either from your back steps or if you're going to be out there actually hunting these things down. It's not always going to be clear cut. So we want to have some of those clear versus unclear situations to try to drive the conversation in terms of, what you think is reportable and or even kind of what you're seeing. And then from there, it may not be totally definitive to you or even to us, but it does help us quite a bit having those reports, even where it's, again, a little bit more nebulous.
And Greg, the only thing that I missed from your previous presentations is a quote of yours that I've stolen and probably misquoted you on. Is we're often told, you don't have any tornadoes in Colorado anyway. And I said, well, that's because the cattle in the Eastern Plains don't have cell phones.
If we had a way to put a camera, like a tracking device on the cow, but put a camera on it instead, I'm sure we would verify a lot of stuff out there. Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Greg, I got a quick question on.
Yes.
I live really close to the foothill. I mean, I'm right up against the foothills, and we get some terrific down, the downdrafts, the Chinooks, and we get warnings. I mean, I watch the weather, and they seem to be pretty accurate. Yeah, it's going to be windy, and the temperature is going to be going up. Are those reportable? I mean, some of them, 80, 90 miles an hour. The house shakes. Is that helpful? Knowing that that's happening, knowing that was going to be happening.
It does. Yeah, absolutely does. We can get like a nice mountain wave system that comes off and it could break right over your area, or we get the nice strong downslope westerly winds. Just compressional warming helps to strengthen those and make them more potent. But I mean, damage is damage. So again, this is geared towards convection in terms of thunderstorms and heavy rain. But wind damage is wind damage. Whether it's tornadic, straight line winds, the damage is going to produce. The damage is going to produce. It's really similar. So again, it's a matter of the orientation. But when it comes to those big systems that you're describing, having an idea of trees being uprooted or snapped, can obviously help verify high wind warnings, or even lead us to issue a high wind warning for a larger area due to the conditions that you're experiencing, at your location. So, if there's any kind of damage that's produced by any kind of weather event, we'd like to definitely know about it. Yep.
Last call here.
I'm I'm gonna go get my beer soon. So yeah, that last call for me too.
Wait a minute. Who was serving?
I got a fridge in the basement full of all kinds of good stuff. So
There you go.
come on down.
Well, Greg, thank you so much. Very interesting and very, very helpful. And I echo that idea. I have not taken any of the basic classes before,
Okay.
but the simulation is really, really helpful to just kind of hear it spoken, what somebody else says it, and with a reference to what we're looking at. So thanks for doing that.
Excellent.
Just one thing I would like to add is, as ham radio operators, we tend to talk more than we listen. And during these weather nets, it is so important to listen, because so many times I have heard Pueblo say, okay, we're taking only inch hail reports. And the very next guy that comes on that radio says, I've got pea-size hail. Now, what part of listening didn't he understand? And I think Greg and the people down there will be way too polite to you, but they've got a ton of stuff going on. I mean, they've got social media, they've got computers left and right in that facility. And for us to get in chit chat on that repeater during a severe event is just a terrible disservice. So I think we all need to focus on listen, and like he's saying, reportable stuff, concise, quick, get on there and get off, and not what the dog is thinking about the thunder. I mean, that's not important.
I appreciate that. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of traffic on that net, any given afternoon in the late spring and summer months, but we're there, we're listening, we'll hear about your favorite soup that you made or how your hip's acting up, whatever it might be. We're here, we're listening to it, and we don't mind. But yeah, Jim, like you said, when it's hitting the fan, that's when, we really kick into high gear, and that's when, lives are being impacted by it. So the more we can get quicker and clearer, the better off we're all going to be.
Well, I appreciate what you guys do down there. It's fantastic. And it would be really great if there wasn't COVID and we could actually come there and see what you guys do sometimes. I know some of the Aries guys get down there, but that would be a really great experience for some of us.
No, I agree. I mean, so when we get into active weather, that's when we're kind of, shutting down. That's when the more fun time would be to have you in the office. That's probably when we can't have you in the office though. But any other given, high pressure kind of day where there's, clear skies and no impact. And once we are back allowing visitors into the office, we'll set up a couple tours for you all. And then always the first Saturday in December, we always do the Skywarn Recognition Day. This past year was more virtual because, again, we are closed to the public. But if we do end up coming back to the, in person, we're always having the ham folks come down for that. John Blogo comes down quite a bit of times for that too. So there's a good mixture of both Pueblo, Orfano, and even Pikes Peak region folks coming out for that. So we're always happy to host you. And I echo your sentiments, Jim. Like, we couldn't do as good of a job without you all, and I mean that sincerely. The amount of time and dedication you all put into helping us with our mission is just tremendous. And the reports that you give us are great, and that's why we no longer issue spotter IDs for the public, because we weren't really getting a lot of reports from the public. We rely almost solely on the hams providing reports to our office. Social media is good, but the hams are where it's at. You guys and gals are all truly dedicated to what you do, for fun and in times of need. We greatly need you. You're there for us. So again, our relationship with you all is tremendous, and we want to keep it going for many years to come. So again, thank you all for what you do to help us with our mission.
Thank you, Greg.
And thank you, Greg, because I know Jim and I both commented for the daily weather net. We look more forward to Pueblo weather. Are you on the air? And then your comments after we could read, what Sid reads,
Right.
easily on the computer. But when you guys put in your extra, 2-3 minutes worth, that does everything for us.
Excellent. Excellent. Good to hear that. Thank you.
Well, with that, Greg, thanks very much. Really, really appreciate
You're very welcome.
time tonight, and thanks everybody for participating.
Awesome.
Greg,
Great.
back to
Thanks
you.
again.
Greg Smith, back to you.
Thank you. I enjoyed that. Learned a lot. So with that, I'd like to say goodnight to everyone. Thanks for joining us.